started. Okay, I see we have quite a few people coming in. We are going to get started momentarily. If you are joining us, you will see a poll question up on your screen. If you could do us a favor and answer that very quickly, we would greatly appreciate it. It always helps us to have as much information as possible so that we can ensure that you have a seamless time with us today. We will be starting, really kicking off in just about a minute. Close to 30 seconds as people enter today's events. Okay. Well, thank you for being on with us today. We are very excited to have the team from Atrius on for building strong foundations to confidently navigate regulatory change. My name is Jessica Hunt, and I'm one of the owners of E&E Leader. With us today, we have Chelsea and Chris from the Atrius Acuity team, and they are going to talk a little bit about themselves after we go through some housekeeping items. So as always, this event is going to be recorded, so please don't feel like you have to take notes. We are excited for the audience to participate as much as possible. You will have the opportunity throughout the next hour to ask questions using your Q&A button that is at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best after the discussion to get through all of the questions, but if for some reason we do not get a chance to answer your specific question today, a member from the team will follow up with you and actually will share the questions and answers with everybody who is on today. So sit back, enjoy the conversation. In the chat, let us know where you're coming from, where you are dialing in from. I know we have a pretty global audience, as always, on with us. And thank you to those who have jumped in and answered the poll question that is up on your screen. A little bit about today's event before I hand it over to Chelsea and Chris to talk to you a little about themselves. This is going to be a discussion, a full conversation between me and the team on the screen. So if we are talking about a topic that you specifically have a question about, please feel free to put that in the Q&A, and I will do my best to navigate my questions as well as the ones that are coming in from the audience. And towards the end of the event, we are going to have a product demo that has been extremely highly received by attendees of these webinars before, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions as well. So I'm going to leave that poll question up for the next minute or so, but Chelsea, I'm going to give it to you to introduce yourself, and then Chris, and then we'll get this thing going.
Thanks, Jessica. It's always a pleasure to be here, and some of you may recognize me. I've been on E&E Leaders webinars a couple times now, sharing our Atrius sustainability product. Today we're going to talk a little bit more of our Atrius energy product. And I've been working with Atrius for about 8 years now. My background is really in environmental science and carbon accounting. And so I'm really excited to kind of get in there and talk about our energy product today. But I am calling from California. I'm a California girl through and through, have lived all up and down the coast. And a fun fact about me is I have a little two-legged cat, Lieutenant Dan, who is my lifeline. So maybe we'll send out a picture of him in the resources at the end. Thanks for having me, Jessica.
All right, and howdy everyone. I'm Chris Zebrowski. I've been with Atrius for just about a year now, coming up on a year. But before that, I was an energy manager. I have my CEM. I was an energy manager for a large commercial property company, and I did that for about 10 years before I came into this role. So I have a lot of experience with actually doing energy management day to day. With numerous tools, but mostly with Atrius. I was an end user of the platform for about 7.5 of those 10 years that I was an energy manager. And I'm excited to be here. This is a bit different format than other webinars I've done where it's been more presentational. So I'm excited to just kind of have a conversation and let the good info flow today. So glad to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Chelsea, I'm not sure how we've done so many events together, yet I never knew you had a two-legged cat named Lieutenant Dan. So there we go. Let's get this started. And thank you to those in the chat who have let us know where you are calling in from, joining us from. It always is fun to see where people are coming. If anyone else is from the DC area, let me know because that's where I am. Okay, so energy is central to everything we do. Yet the ways we track, measure, and optimize are constantly shifting, as we all see. So let's just start with the foundation. So from Chelsea, from the product side, what has been the most valuable and foundational practice for building a successful adaptable energy strategy, and one that's grounded in really accurate data, because we get data from from so many sources, but it's not always accurate. So really accurate data that you can trust and defend.
Yeah, so I think you said it right there. It's the foundation. You really need to have a strong data foundation when you're talking and planning your energy strategy, and creating that unified vision of your energy footprint. When you have data coming from different disparate systems, so you might have data that's in your utility bills, maybe you have some sub-metering in some of your buildings, but they're all in these different systems. It can create inconsistencies in the data, and you have to have confidence in the data in order to make your decision. So you need to start with a mechanism to get all of that data aggregated and in one place. And this foundation will really allow you to understand your energy use and align on what's important to the business so you can build this clear and consistent strategy. Once you have all of that data in one place, you can start to look towards things like data quality metrics, audit logs, just getting all that data in a similar format and visualizing it as a whole, so that you have a better understanding of your data.
And that makes complete sense. And Chris, as you stated before, you have the perspective too of an end user, not just working with project managers, but really being the person that utilizes the data. So as Chelsea just talked about, from a technology perspective, and as I said earlier, you're working directly with energy managers. So how does the technology and the data play out in your everyday practice?
I'd like to echo one thing that Chelsea said, and the biggest driver toward making an efficient strategy here is to centralize everything. I've seen it, from both sides of the desk that the one of the largest obstacles to implementing an effective energy strategy is having disparate sources or disparate locations where the data is kept. So if you can centralize everything, utility bills, BMS and Internet of Things stream, sub-meter data, all that into one place, it really makes things a lot easier because you have all of the data available, and you can do a lot more analysis when everything is right there for you to take a look at. But it's not just centralizing, you also have to verify. You've got to take a look at the data, reconcile it against invoices, you've got to look for those anomalies and validate meter hierarchies. And I think the other really important thing is to link that data to operational reality. The numbers, in your platform are one thing, but you have to understand what's driving those numbers. So whether that's walking the sites that you're measuring, or I know a lot of people work remotely now, having those conversations with the folks who are there on the site every day running those buildings to understand what's driving that energy use, what might be anomalous, what might be, something that's supposed to be there but looks a little bit different when compared to other buildings. Just understanding the whole context of the why of your energy data, not just the what.
No, and that's really important. I guess my question, and this goes back to your follow-up with what Chelsea had to say, is centralizing the data. How many companies and how many companies have you worked with, or do you work with that, when you first start, they don't have a centralized system? And what does that look like to get the data centralized?
What does it look like? Sometimes it can be, I think the phrase is herding cats. But but that goes higher up in an earlier step in developing this effective energy strategy is it's not just centralizing it, but also making sure that the appropriate people have access to it. I've worked with some clients who, it used to be before they developed an effective energy strategy that all of the energy and utility bills were going to the finance department, right? Because they're the ones paying the invoices. So the invoice comes in, they mark it off, and they pay it. But finance doesn't really look at or have much concern over the consumption data. So there was some data that was being tracked and recorded, but in terms of an energy strategy, not all of it was easily visible. So centralizing it and making sure that the appropriate parties have access to it to analyze and make decisions based on that data.
No, and that makes sense. Chelsea, I was going to say, do you have anything you wanted to follow up with?
I was just gonna say, to answer your question, Jessica, as far as the customers that we've seen come to Atrius and want to get started with our software, zero of them had their data, all together and in one place. And that's why really, they were looking for a software to do that. But I think they are on, varying levels of, how much they had their stuff together on their end when they came to us. And to Chris's point, having data owners was a critical step to that. So who even are we reaching out with to get access to the data in X building or to get access to the utility bills? They're all across the board. And what we really feel like software has as tied together is bringing all of those users and data owners into one streamlined location so that they can have access to the data they need and know how to get it.
Yeah, and implement, different strategies based on that data there. So,
Mhm.
and data is not just about compliance anymore. It's shaping those big business decisions. So the foundational, energy data. Chris, can you talk about how that really plays into business continuity, cost control, and strategic planning?
Sure. Well, as I'm sure is no surprise, energy costs are one of the biggest expenses that businesses have. So it's important to have a handle on that energy consumption and associated cost so that you can run your facilities as efficiently as possible. Specifically, it helps with business continuity because from an energy management standpoint, the data can help you identify abnormal usage patterns that could signal either equipment failures or, I've seen happen many times where, an override in the schedule in a building was done because of, a later event or a weekend event, and then it never got put back to the normal schedule. So lights and things are coming on when they shouldn't be. So the data will help you identify things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. But in more severe situations like grid instability or supply disruptions, knowing exactly where your energy is most crucial in your operations will allow for much quicker contingency planning, whether that's shifting loads or using a backup generator, but knowing where the key uses of that energy are happening in your business so you can plan ahead and minimize disruption in the case of some kind of crisis is very valuable. And historical consumption patterns, having that data can also help you predict and forecast so you can budget and plan, as well as identify anything that is drifting out of where historically its patterns should be.
No, definitely there. And then Chelsea, when talking about the platform and ensuring that the platform supports, the broader business decisions, how can you just talk to us a little bit about how the platform will play into that?
Yeah, and I think I think it's interesting. We're really seeing that energy data is treated as this strategic asset for these planning conversations, procurement conversations, investor relations, not just a compliance requirement these days. And so I think whether you're steered by internal or external influences, there's these crucial elements to building these energy strategies and this strong data foundation. You want to make sure you have the right data. So we talked about getting into the actual sub meters and looking at trends throughout the day. there's different types of data that you can bring in. And, starting with a foundation, often you're seeing utility bill data brought in, which can create that holistic view. But you also want to talk to people if you're, planning retrofit projects or getting into the building about how to maybe sub-meter spaces, bring in BMS data, get more granular to the, minute even. So you want to make sure that your data matches up with your strategy. If you are ready to make those deep dives, how can you bring the right data and aggregate it into a software? And then, once you have the right data, making sure that data is reliable and that foundation again is really strong. We talked and I mentioned audit proof data a little bit, but I think a lot of people think about audit proofing when they're talking about regulatory reporting, but whenever you're passing your data along to any stakeholders, you want to make sure that data can be trusted. And so you want to look to an aggregated platform that can help tie that data to source documentation if you need it. Bring in a utility bill backup, show change logs, show which users are touching the data, uploading it, changing it, and maybe even bringing up data quality metrics. So you have an idea of what your data looks like holistically, where there might be gaps, where you can kind of touch that. And I've definitely been on both sides of the house where I've been in the spreadsheets planning, sustainability reports, things like that. And you really don't have the same level of oversight there as you would if you are using a software system. And then this really comes into play too when you're ready to share that data out, because you are talking to different stakeholders, and it's the same data but different consumption styles. And so you want to be able to share and manipulate that data in a way that all these different users can have access so they can plan with you and also, use the data for their own initiatives across the organization.
No, and that makes sense too, because you're going to present data to your shareholders and board members very differently than you're going to present data to, the different project managers and, VPs necessarily that you're working with. Now, this is a question that it comes up a lot in the information and the stories that we cover is the energy use of AI from AI. And so how can the platform help, predict energy use for companies who are just now really starting to use AI, in their organizations if they don't have the trend data necessarily since they haven't used it before?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we definitely work with a lot of, or we work with data centers and we work with tech companies that are using AI, and we're definitely seeing this as a concern. I think as far as the energy footprint for an organization, that's often going to be passed down the supply chain, right? It's going to fall on those data centers. But we are seeing more and more data centers pop up that are concerned about this. They're looking for ways that they can focus more on renewable energy. They're constantly driving energy efficiency. And so with that in mind, looking to, where can I house my data where the company is actually concerned about those kinds of things because it's important to my organization. And once you start looking into your supply chain and data centers become a supplier. And I think that's definitely a topic of conversation that's popping up more and more these days.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chris, are you having those conversations as well, with the individuals that you're working with?
I haven't had so much AI specific conversations aside from um, asking if our product was going to incorporate AI. But I think like with Chelsea, at least with the clients that I'm working with, if they are using AI, it's more of it's not their own service. It's another service. And then as Chelsea mentioned, it's kind of passed on down the supply line, the supply chain.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. It's an important part of the conversation. It's in every single conversation I think that people are having throughout their weeks right now. Not every conversation, but they are having the conversation about AI throughout their days. Now, once we have all this data, Chris, how are you helping clients, utilize this data to make the best operational decisions possible and negotiate with utilities? Because I do do companies realize that you can negotiate with utilities?
I think some do. Primarily the ones who have a lot of presence in deregulated markets. I think you have not quite as much wiggle room in states that are still regulated, but there is still some opportunity to negotiate and get on better rates. This data is used for operational decision making. First and foremost, for real-time performance tuning. When you've got real-time or near real-time data coming in, it allows you to adjust schedules, whether that be HVAC or lighting, based on actual occupancy. Maybe this part of the building is off this week or off today, so there's no need to condition that space or turn the lights on in there. It can also help detect anomalies. If you're running a production line and one of your machines starts to creep up in terms of how much it's using, that can signal that something might be amiss, and it requires a deeper look, which can save much more expensive downtime if that goes down and your whole production line has to stop. It's also used for load shifting and peak shaving. Once you have this data and you understand where your heavy users of utility energy are, you can participate in load shifting and peak shaving programs, oftentimes getting an incentive from the utility company to do so. And you can shut off or scale back the most appropriate pieces of equipment for your business without affecting the production as you move forward. And then portfolio-wide optimization. One of the things that I always did as an energy manager when getting a new client was what my previous boss called a rack and stack, where we just took all of the buildings, ranked them by energy use per square foot. And I'm sure this is no surprise to energy managers on the call here, but we would then take usually about the top 5 highest users and have more in-depth conversations with those site teams to find out what was going on, why their buildings were so much higher than the rest of the portfolio. But the other thing that we would do is we would also look at the 5 best users and talk to them as well, because there were oftentimes best practices or capital or something that they had implemented at those sites that got their energy use a lot lower than the rest of the portfolio. So having that data there allowed us to identify both the I guess you could say bad outliers, the ones that needed some attention, as well as the good outliers that could provide lessons to the rest of the portfolio.
Have those companies been, I mean, they should be receptive if it's best practices that could help them, but is that hard to kind of bridge the gap sometimes between what a company really wants to do in terms of, I mean, yes, money, it comes down to the bottom line of money and energy use and stuff like that, but sometimes certain companies aren't as receptive, or people aren't as receptive to the changes that need to make. So how do you bridge that gap?
Well, again, having all of this data centralized and
Mhm.
available and analyzed goes a long way. Was one of the most helpful um, things I have done is using this data to show, especially finance folks, procurement folks who might bristle at the thought of spending, a few $100,000 on a large capital project. Um, if you can show and demonstrate, well, yes, it might cost this much now, but look how much we're going to spend over the next 5 years if we don't fix this. And that's not even, it could be, that's not even worst case scenario where if this goes down for a week and we have to shut down
Yeah,
production. So
exactly.
having all of the numbers and I guess you could say a different context for the numbers goes a long way toward getting those projects through. Because I mean, it's no secret. A lot of times, finance people they just see a big number that's not in the budget originally, and they say no. So with all of this data, you can make a much more compelling case for why these funds should be expended.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with you there. And I really do want to go into now looking at how technology expands visibility. So, Chelsea, beyond just the basic utility data, how are building management systems and IoT sensors helping organizations gain a really deeper visibility into their energy use?
Yeah, and I touched on this a little bit is it's actually interesting because I think today it's a lot easier to start out with utility bills as the baseline, but it hasn't always been like that. I mean, we've always had access to utility bills in spreadsheets, but as far as automating the ingress of them, that's a little bit newer. If I feel like most people on this call probably don't know about the Atrius origin story, or Building Insights, what it used to be called, is we actually started out as a higher ed energy monitoring tool for dorm room competitions. And so that really relied on sub-metering of these dorms. And back then, that was kind of the easiest way to start getting this data. We weren't really talking about utility bills as much. And we wanted to get into the building and see, which floors were conserving the most energy in these competitions throughout the buildings, university versus university. And so I always think that's a really fun story to tell. But now we're seeing that people often start with utility bills and then decide to dive in. And we're rarely seeing the opposite. But submetering is a really great place to just get into your building and see, where and when energy is being consumed. You can look into, different floors, different spaces within the building, and really kind of pinpoint how those buildings are being used and what some of the operational schedules are to kind of fine tune those specific spaces. You can then, get into, how energy is being used in those spaces, looking at things like the lighting loads versus the plug loads versus some of the equipment in the building. And look at that data more frequently. That also kind of lends to bringing building management system data in. If you have a BMS that's connected to specific building assets. I know there's in the facility manager space, the BMS is kind of the core to the operations. But being able to access data specific to your HVAC system, your boilers and chillers, especially in those larger organizations, using software and hardware together, can enable you to do proactive, even predictive analytics that can really take your cost saving strategies, especially to the next level. And then kind of like I mentioned, so integrating some of these, sub-metered values, BMS data with different business metrics. So whether you have occupancy sensors that tell you, who's occupying that room at the time, what should I turn my thermostat to we see different organizations bringing in data from their ERP systems sometimes. In manufacturing, we've gotten a lot of organizations that want to see with the units they're producing, how much kilowatt hours are they using per unit or how many dollars of electricity? It really gets into that kind of those energy intensity metrics that are critical to, not only the energy strategy, but the business strategy and making sure that they're, cutting cost and, carbon where they find that important in the organization as well.
No, and Chris, I'm going to jump to you soon, but we have so many questions coming in about best practices for regulatory framework. If Energy Star, and this is something that we're going to check on, is ancient history, and what are some of the regulatory changes that you have heard possibly coming down the pipeline, or what your clients are really concerned about when it comes to these changes. So, Chris, I'm going to give it to you.
Oh, sure. So if Energy Star is phased out, the key thing to remember is to think about it more of as a change in a reporting framework, not the loss of any kind of capability. Especially if you own your own data and you've got it all centralized, you've still got everything that you need for other regulatory compliance as well. You can export and archive all of your Energy Star data. But really, from what I've seen, a lot of the regulatory requirements around Energy Star are really reporting on consumption. That's really what they're looking for, is just, how much did your building, what are the basic stats on your building and how much did it use over the past year? I believe New York is getting set to implement some kind of performance requirements, but that's based around use per square foot, not any kind of specific Energy Star score. So again, if Energy Star does go by the wayside, a tool like Atrius, where all of the data is centralized, will still have everything that the regulatory reporting requirements are looking for, again, centralized in one central spot, and it'll be easy enough to continue with that reporting. Just a matter of maybe creating a report template or a dashboard or something that has all of the metrics that the specific framework is looking for, but all of the data is in there and it's ready to go.
No, Chelsea, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think Chris covered it pretty well. I think I can see and understand the concern of the organizations that are kind of using ESPM as this way to organize and aggregate their data. And so I would say, the first step is to identify where you're relying on an Energy Star. We don't necessarily know what the different local, reporting entities that rely on you to report through Energy Star are going to ask of us. So just making sure you're preserving that data, export any data you have in Energy Star today, just so you have that on hand. But really, you are going to want to look to a platform like Atrius to, get that data all back in one place. You don't want to go backwards and start to rely on your spreadsheets again. And I know Energy Star had some other tools as well, some ways to view your data, year over year, trend analysis, and then the benchmarkings are really big. So the Energy Star benchmarking, I will say, I think that's something that we're all gonna probably be pretty bummed about losing, but there are other organizations out there that do external national benchmarking. In Atrius, we work with the EIA, the Energy Information Administration's CBEX database on commercial buildings in the US. So we do have benchmarking values that they look towards all the buildings in the country and break it down by building type and size. And so, looking to other organizations that are doing stuff like Energy Star, we don't want to incite fear and think that everything is going away. There are tools out there, and we're happy to talk through them further. I believe Atrius did a webinar that's available online a couple months ago. So if you guys have any more questions, we're happy to walk through those. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. I knew that was going to happen at least one point. Sorry, there's some background noise here. And I mean, this kind of goes into, and I know we're going to get into a product demo. So I did put a note in the chat. If you have specific questions about, Atrius's platform or something that you want Chelsea to explore during the demo, please put that information there and we'll do our best to, make sure we touch on those areas. Now, resilience is something, it's a big part of our conversation, obviously. The grid is being overloaded specifically, in certain areas and certain times of the year. So with rising power demands, Chris, how are businesses really rethinking resilience, and what do on-site generation, battery storage, flexible procurement strategies, how do they all play a role in reducing, exposures to outages and volatility? Because we can't have a hospital, for example, go down.
Exactly, exactly. I think a key thing here is that businesses have kind of, at least in the business world, have kind of redefined what it means to have business resilience. It used to just mean, we're keeping the lights on, but now I think a lot of businesses are thinking about resilience as the ability to maintain critical operations at predictable costs, regardless of what's happening on the grid. So tools like on-site generation can allow for resilience by keeping your essential loads running during outages. You're not relying solely on diesel or natural gas generators. It can also reduce peak demand from the grid, which lowers exposure to price spikes. And overall, over time, those offsets that will kind of offset grid purchases, and it gives you a little bit of sustainability cred as well by having that on-site generation. Battery storage is another technology that can assist with this. It allows for instantaneous switchover during outages or voltage dips, rather than waiting a little bit for the generators to come back on. In an application like a hospital, critical care environment, that's absolutely crucial that there's no interruption in the service there. You can also, similarly to the on-site, you can use it to offset some peak shaving. I know of some businesses who have large battery storage that they tap into during high time of use prices. I know California has some very high time of use prices depending on what tariff you're on. So during those peak times, rather than pulling from the grid, they'll dip into their battery storage that is charged overnight when prices are lower, and that allows them to maintain operations, but at a much less expensive per unit cost. And then it can also allow for flexible procurement, mixed of fixed index and block and index contracts to balance your cost stability along with what opportunities are in the market. And try to we talked a little bit earlier about negotiating with the utility company. See if you can get a contract that like for some kind of demand management. Maybe you get an incentive to reduce load during grid stress events, whether that's unplanned or the planned peak shaving that the utilities are engaged in. And if you're interested in something like green PPAs and hedges, if you lock in a renewable supply at a predictable rate, that reduces any kind of budget uncertainty, aside from increases in use. But that predictable per unit price will reduce a lot of stress levels throughout the organization as you're operating, because it's always going to be a set price per unit there.
Oh yeah, and Chelsea, I'm just thinking back to some of the stuff that Chris said and how important having the accurate data is. What type of data can companies get from Atrius's platform that might be surprising to them, that could help them with these conversations that Chris is having, for example, with companies when it comes to decentralized energy strategies?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about kind of resiliency planning, we want to get as much of an outlook on what our future looks like as well. And so we're definitely seeing technology really evolve to support more data that's going to give you a more accurate picture of the future. And so Atrius has algorithmic baselines built in that do take into consideration your historical energy consumption and patterns, as well as weather patterns to kind of predict how your energy use is going to look in the future. And so using more tools like that, and they're getting more and more advanced, I think will help you kind of have those conversations of, hey, this is what we're seeing today, and now is important, but the future is, the next most important thing. How can we, understand what projects we need to prioritize, where we might need to step in and where we're worried about our energy going in the future, so that we can plan, different types of energy procurement or different initiatives that are going to make us strongest in the future. And I think we're definitely seeing more and more AI and ML applications to these technologies. I just seeing that the technologies be able to bring in more and more different variables. So, talking about your growth plan, your electrification goals, what regulatory changes might be out there in the context of, where are the climate risks in my portfolio? When you're dealing with, I'm in California, and I know we have fire prevention. So if the wind is going, the grids might shut down, and then you would have to resort to backup power. But if you're managing a global portfolio of buildings, it's hard to maintain that level of understanding about every locale and every geography. And so I think we're really seeing technology start to step up and bring in all of these different variables. We're in an age of information, and I think a lot of these tools are being fine-tuned. So figuring out the applications that are going to be the most accurate and being able to speak to those when you're having those conversations is going to be crucial in these kind of this gray area as we move forward.
No, Chris, I see you shaking your head a lot. Did you want to add anything to what Chelsea said?
I don't really have much to add other than what she said. Yeah, I'm in total agreement. That fantastic points there.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we are, Chelsea, if you want to get ready to share your screen to do the product demo, that would be great. This is a good time to mention to the attendees. Again, thank you for submitting some questions in. And again, we'll take any questions that come in about Atrius's platform, but there will be at the end of the event, or when you close the event, a survey that pops up. It helps us plan for future events, gives you the opportunity to add in any last minute questions that you might think of if you don't submit them while we're live. So just putting that out there. Yes, and someone mentioned in the comments the U.S. Green Building Certification lead 5. Is that something that you got, the Atrius's platform, one of the organizations that you work with in terms of reporting standards?
We haven't worked specifically with them a ton, but we definitely have organizations talking about it. I think that kind of comes into the conversation of making sure you have all the right data in one place and also the supporting documents. So we've definitely worked with customers to gather the data that's needed there and also retain any information related to that and share it in the same place. So bringing in, LEED certifications and then also being able to tell that story with data is something that we've helped our customers with. All right, are we ready for the demo? Okay, great. So I just wanted to bring up, this is our Atrius Energy and Sustainability homepage. Atrius Energy is the core, so just to clarify, and then sustainability is the emissions calculation engine that's built on. So anything you see in here is going to be Atrius Energy unless it has an emissions stamp on it. That's going to be just what else you can do if you add on sustainability. But this is the homepage, and I really just wanted to touch on this because we are talking about this data foundation and aggregating data in one place. And so I think this gives a really good picture of what you can have access to if you are relying on a software that's really tailored to do this. So here you can see in my organization, I have my 54 buildings across the world. I'm bringing in 721 points and 132 bill points. So 132 are those utility bills. Everything else can span kind of the range from submetered energy data, all the way to supply chain data if I am doing emissions reporting, and all of that can live in one system. You'll see here we have 17 integrations. So you really want to find a product that is integration agnostic that'll work with you to bring your data into the product so you can aggregate all of that data in one place, whether it's from your solar systems, your water, your energy, or that supply chain data if you're looking at that. And so going in from there, we really have a focus on your building portfolio. So really driving into those buildings and seeing, which ones are at a high level. Where should we even start when we're beginning our energy strategy? So if we are, most of the customers we're seeing that are just getting started, they're just aggregating all their data for the first time, and what can they do from there? Well, right off the bat, if you had, utility bills only, you could look at a year's holistic view of your electricity in your portfolio. If you have some of the sub-metered data, maybe you'll bring in solar production as well. But I really like this view because it gives you a holistic view of your entire portfolio. So just year over year, how am I doing month by month compared to the previous year? Being able to see that, these are the kinds of numbers that are typically reported for, high level regulatory compliance. And then you can get down into the buildings as well for some of that building level reporting, but also that analysis step. So if I were to come in here as an energy manager, and here I have, electricity, solar, water, I can also scroll down to my natural gas, waste, and recycling. We support about 1,500 data points because we do touch a lot of those sustainability data points. So whatever, energies you are using, we can support bringing that data in. But looking at electricity specifically, just to start, what I would come in here and do is look at my buildings really and say, how do I want to get started? Maybe I want to start submetering for the first time and I don't really know what to do. Probably going to choose this building that has, a ton more electricity than the rest of my portfolio. We can normalize by things like EUI, so kilowatt hours per square foot. We can look at cost as well. So if you are bringing in the utility bills, the beauty of that data is you can look at cost and consumption side by side. And we can show a little bit about kind of what that cost data looks like in a second. Well, I guess I'll just pull it up.
Real,
Um,
real quick, Chelsea,
yeah.
this came in, and this is just a question, and I think it's a really good one and one that I'm sure other people have is, does this platform provide automated alerts for when performance metrics deviate from, specific targets or from the norm? So what would that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, how I would typically set that up is we do have alerts. So, I'm actually in my Atlanta office building right now. I might go into a specific data point. And I guess let me back up a little bit how I might figure out how to set that alert. So, maybe I'm looking at a specific data point in my building, and this is a heat map view. So I have submetering or BMS data that gives me this kind of hourly granular view. And I'm seeing that, my building operating hours are 8 to 5, but there is some behavior that's kind of happening a little bit earlier. Maybe someone's coming in the building a little early, or it looks like here this one's scheduled pretty well, but you might have that situation where someone leaves the light on, or the HVAC runs all night. And so if this is totally out of whack, you can start to look into this data and maybe do things like set alerts. So I can go and view this data close up and kind of see what kind of consumption is expected at the different hours of the day. And then that's what I would really use to create my alert. So I can go in here, add an alert. And what I can do, there's a few different conditions that we allow. So different things if I'm concerned about, the rate that I don't want to exceed a certain value. I can also, set these for hourly consumption, daily consumption, or monthly consumption. And if that exceeds the value that I've, determined to be kind of that expected number for that time of day, then it will send an email alert to instruct you to check in on that data point. We also have alerts based on forecast. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility. And so this is if the hourly consumption exceeds my forecast by 10%, then I want to receive an alert. And a forecast is based on, for that hour, what the patterns have been historically. And so if on average the historical consumption for my hour is about 70 kilowatt hours, if that's 10% over, then you can receive the alert. You can set up who you want to receive this alert. So if maybe you're the energy manager and you have a facility manager in mind, you would set them up in the platform, add them as a recipient, add a little message, and they can start receiving those emails.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of customizations for this platform, how customizable are the dashboards and reporting tools for different roles? So energy managers versus C-suite.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's kind of the beauty of Atrius is these dashboards are extremely customizable. What we typically do is during onboarding, we want to listen to, why did you buy the software? What do you want to get out of it? And we'll start you off with some templated dashboards. So maybe a portfolio, some individual building dashboards. But what you can really do from there is quite cool. So you can go into any of these dashboards. Let me go to the dashboard. And either edit the templated dashboards that have been created for you or create your own from scratch. And so as you can see here, just the formatting specifically, so you can move around any of these cards. If you wanted to add any new cards, we have a library here of, quite a few different both data cards, text and imaging cards. So if you are, super data heavy and you're coming in here just because you want to, look at a bunch of heat maps and look at the, hour by hour, minute by minute trends, then you might set up a dashboard that have bookmarked on your browser, and you come in every day and you look at those trends and see how they're doing. But if you're then sharing that data up to, leadership, you might want to make something a little bit more palatable. You can add, pictures, descriptions. You can add in cost here, emissions as well. So the flexibility really is endless, and allows you to kind of, using the same data, really create these different views that can be sent to different stakeholders.
And Chris, while she's got the data up here, when you're looking at data on the platform with, your clients and different energy managers, what are they, I don't want to say what are they most interested in, because everybody, every organization has their own specific goals, and obviously cost savings and energy savings are at the top of those. But, when you get in with them to really look at this, what are they saying?
Well, a lot of that depends on the specific person that I'm talking to. So if it's someone like an energy manager or a facilities manager, they're really interested just in their buildings and how their buildings are doing and what they can do to improve that. So they will have a lot more granular data on their dashboards, like heat maps, maybe the interval data, so they can see in almost real time how their facilities are doing. On the flip side, C-suite, the higher level folks, they're not really that interested in, an hour by hour breakdown of how each building is doing. They just want to know, how much are we using, how does it compare against the goals, and how are we doing as far as that goes, and what's your plan to do better overall. So when I was an energy manager, I had just kind of some sets of dashboards that were and reports that were ready to go. So I had some that were templated for my FMs and my engineers who got the reports on their buildings, and then a little bit higher level for the property managers or regional managers who are interested in, just kind of how their group is doing, but maybe doesn't need all the granular data. And then the big monthly reports that went out to the higher ups, which were really just kind of a high level overview. Here's how much you used, here's how much it cost, here's how that compares to the goals that you've set, and here are some recommendations for how to proceed.
No, great. Thank you for jumping in. I know, Chelsea, you're not done with the complete demo yet, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Yeah, those were all great questions. Yeah, so I've showed a couple of dashboards. I wanted to pull this one up as well. This is another use case that also involves kind of our custom dashboarding, but also allows you to kind of plan and track different projects in the organization. So this really does fit into the energy strategy conversation. So once you do have in those buildings, if you have access to cost data, whether it's through your utility bill, or we have a rate and tariff engine that can, match up your current utility rate to a sub-meter data, for example. We see customers coming in here and mapping out some of their projects so that they can measure ROI, and then kind of use this for their own tracking. But also, I think these dashboards are especially great for sharing up, especially as we are, budgets are tight, and we want to make sure that you're backing up our requests for budget with data and showcasing, when we've been able to be successful with our projects. And so this is just comparing energy use in the Atlanta office before and after a retrofit, using a baseline based on, where the energy would have been before the project compared to what it is after. And then this is again another dashboard. So this is something that we, create as a template, but then can be edited to kind of showcase whatever you want to share. So you can update these to also include carbon savings. You can add additional cards to further tell your story, and it really does give you that flexible lens.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I did want to dive into some of our analytics apps. So I think that alerts question was, oh, is there another question?
No, go ahead. No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was going to get into too.
Okay, perfect. So these are more of our on-the-fly analysis tools. So I talked about how this is a great use case for analyzing your usage against kind of your operational expectations and setting those alerts. Another tool that we have, and this is cooling and heating degree days overlaid on the right-hand side. So as I mentioned before, we do bring in weather data that we use in our baseline algorithms from your local weather stations. We can also bring in cooling heating degree days, average outside temperatures that can be overlaid on any of those trend analysis or here on the heat map. So you can kind of understand like how your building's reacting to maybe potential weather patterns. But another one that's really good for on-the-fly analysis is our load profile analysis. And this is going to give you a really cool outlook of how your electricity load plays out over the course of a day. And so what this is showing is over the last month on weekdays. So if I'm looking at a building that has different operating days, weekdays versus weekends, I want to see, when people are in the office, when I'm expecting some of my highest loads, and how that's trending throughout the day. We talked a lot about, utility analysis and energy procurement and really understanding how your load is. We've worked with customers that have installed batteries and they want to understand, when is it best to pull energy off of the grid and into my battery? When is it more useful to discharge it? And so these tools can be really helpful for energy decisions like that.
Oh, definitely. And having all of this data is amazing, but I can also imagine that it can be overwhelming, especially, if a company has not necessarily utilized a platform like this.
Mhm.
So how do you, besides just, going through all of the features and all of the data that you can extract and utilize to make business decisions, how do you have that conversation with, not necessarily the most tech savvy person or the person that is not used to using a platform to get them to say, okay, I'm going to learn, I'm going to take the time, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And honestly, Chris, I'm curious what your experience is as a customer success manager when you have to have those conversations.
It's, you're right. It can be a bit overwhelming for folks who might not be used to it. But in my experience, it's never been more overwhelming than just having a whole bunch of Excel sheets with a bunch of numbers on it. So we're already ahead as far as that goes. But that um, helping the customers through that and helping them use the platform as effectively as possible to its full capability. That's really what my role as a customer success manager is. So and it depends on the level of need that the client has. But we work with them not to help them, not just the technical aspects of, how do you do this in the platform, but also valuable insights. The dashboard templates that Chelsea mentioned were not just ones that we came up with that we thought looked cool. They were based on lots and lots of experience, both from the other side of the table as energy managers and what we've found with our other customers that they've used that work well. And so that is how we develop those dashboard templates for ones that they're field tested and proven to provide that actionable insight. So really folks can get almost right to work rather than, okay, now I have to learn how to do all this stuff in this platform and then I can work on my actual energy goals.
No, I love that. The visual learner in me loves the charts and the colors, and it really helps me focus in on a um, specific data point. Well, I know we are almost at the top of the hour, so I want to give the two of you, and thank you to those who are still on with us today. I want to give you guys the floor just to, give maybe one key takeaway each. So Chelsea, I'll start with you, and then you can pass it to Chris.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think my
Yeah, I put you on
takeaway,
the spot.
no, no, is that especially I think a lot of my background is in carbon accounting and ESG reporting. And I think that's something that is a big topic of conversation. There's so much going on in the country as it relates to energy management and sustainability, and it can often feel overwhelming the directions we're pulled in. But I think the root of what we wanted to talk about today is that energy is and has always been crucial to business strategy, whether it aligns with political regulations. And so, yeah, just making sure that where you are is your head is clear and you're consistent about how energy impacts your business. It's always going to be relevant.
And I would add to that by saying that really the best piece of advice I can give is to build a unified and trustworthy data foundation before you invest heavily in any technology or programs. Because without reliable and centralized data, even the best system, program, anything like that can be very difficult, if not impossible, to evaluate, scale, or sometimes justify to the folks who ultimately have those decision-making capabilities. And so once you have that, then you can make smarter technology choices, get faster proof of you on your return on investment, and you'll be more agile as policy and markets shift.
Now, excellent advice to leave us with. I don't have anything to wrap up with because, Chris, I think you did that and Chelsea perfectly. So thank you again. We're already getting positive feedback. Please fill out the survey. If you don't get a chance to fill it out today, it's going to be in your follow-up email. And again, this is going to be available on demand. If you have any further questions, please feel free to put them in that survey, reach out to us, and we'll pass all the information over to the team at Atrius. So Chelsea, thank you. Chris and Ben, who's behind the scenes for the work you put into getting this event together today. So thanks again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Jessica.
Thank you. Appreciate it.